Hello, everyone. This is going to be your Ancient India recap. This will help you complete your study guide that I assigned you this week. A couple things with the study guide. First thing to know that this is going to be due on Friday. So when you're in Google Classroom, you should see a new assignment today that says Ancient India Study Guide, and that's going to be a Google Doc that you're going to complete. It's going to be worth 30 points. It's a 3-page document. There will be spots for you to fill in your work. And this video will help you kind of remember some of the things that we talked about last week and the week before with India so that you are ready to take a test that we are going to do next week because we are wrapping up India here. Just to kind of show you real quick what that's going to look like. So if you go into your Google Classroom, I have a sample class here. You'll see an assignment that I posted called Ancient India Study Guide. If you click that, my screen looks a little different because I'm on the teacher view. But you'll go under Classwork and you'll see some instructions here that I have for you. Here's kind of what I would recommend. I would recommend opening up this video on YouTube. So I have a YouTube link right here. And then opening up the Google Doc right next to it. So when you open up the Google Doc, you'll see that I asked you several questions from India, the things that we've been talking about. And then I left little boxes under each one where you'll fill in your answers that I'll be able to see on the Google Doc when you submit it to me through Google Classroom. Okay, so when you finish the study guide, you just go back into your classwork, you'll click Turn In, and then I'll be able to see that you finished up the study guide here. So kind of get into it a little bit. The very first section of your study guide, first page is going to be all about the geography of India. So that's what we started with. That's going to be kind of locations and certain map features that are important. So the next few slides will help you with that first page. So starting off very basic, you can either look at this map on my screen here, or you can look on the map behind me. India is located right here in the world. So back here, it's going to be on this yellow part right there, right above the Indian Ocean. That's where we've been focused on the last few weeks here. And if you know your 7 continents, which you should at this point, that is going to be on the continent of Asia. All right, it's the biggest continent in the world, and India is going to be located right there. Some of the important words that we talked about with India. First one we have over here is monsoon. Remember, monsoon is when heavy winds bring heavy rain to an area of land. We know that those are pretty common in India and they can be pretty destructive, can affect flooding quite a bit. And then on the right here, we talked about subcontinent. That's one that a few people were confused on. So if you look at my screen here, you'll see that Asia is in the green and India is in the white right here. So India, plus a few other countries near India, is considered a subcontinent of Asia, which basically means it's just separated from the rest of the continent in some way, shape, or form. In this case, if I were to zoom in on that, you can see India here, and then you can see Asia would be typically the rest over here, and you'll see a ton of mountains right here. We know the Himalaya mountains are right here. We have the Hindu Kush mountains over here. So since we have mountains that go around the entire northern border of India, that's called a subcontinent because India plus those countries are kind of separated from the rest of Asia, so it would be hard to get to all of those places. So basically, you just need to know that it's kind of part of a larger continent with subcontinent. You will need to know your map features. I'll put these up here in a second. A couple specific questions that you have on your study guide. The first one says the large mountain range that separates the northeast part of India. You will know that that is the mountain range right here, the largest mountain range in the world, which is going to be the Himalayas. And then down here, why did they settle by the Indus River? We've talked about that a lot. They settled by the Indus River, which is going to be number 1 right here, because that is fertile farmland, but mostly because it flooded reliably twice a year. Just like, remember we talked about Egypt with the Nile River, that one flooded reliably as well. So we could count on it. They knew when it was going to flood. It wasn't flooding randomly like, back in Mesopotamia, their rivers. So this one floods at the same time every year, which is why it's the best river that they settled by. Here are the locations, just as a reminder. If you need to copy those down, you might get a few of those questions on your test, so just make sure you know those 8 places over here. Some key vocab that you'll see on the second page now of your Google Doc. You'll see the word citadel, Vedas, and Dharma. So the very, very first word that you're going to see is citadel. If you remember, citadels are going to be those like giant raised up fortresses that are above the city. Back in ancient India, they'd be kind of like used for protection. A lot of upper class people might live there. If you remember, I showed you a picture of my friends and I from college that built a fort in our living room. So we thought that was kind of fun. Maybe that'll help you remember a little bit. But a fort's basically a way to kind of protect and kind of just show upper class. That'd be in the upper city. We got the Vedas, which is just the holy text of Hinduism. But if you remember that Vedas is very important with the caste system, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. So the Vedas are the ancient text of Hinduism. And then another one is we're going to have this Dharma. Dharma is part of Hinduism, but remember, Dharma is just your job or your duty in life. And with India, it's going to be mostly what caste you're born into. They believe that whatever job you're born into, you should perform it well, and then that should lead you to good karma in the future. So we got the Vedas there. That's the holy text, and then the Dharma. Dharma kind of sets up the caste system and is kind of the whole idea of performing your job well. So next, leading into the caste system, this is going to be the bottom half of that second page. Number 1 says, what is a caste? I think all of you probably know that one at this point. But a caste is basically just another name for a social class. There are 5 castes in India. Sometimes they leave the untouchables off the caste system. But we know there's 5 main castes. So we have 5 levels to this pyramid. And a caste is basically just a social class. Or you say the caste system, you're saying just the entire social structure of India. So starting from the top, we've got the Brahmins at the top. We've got the Kshatriyas on the second level, second most powerful. The third level, we have the Vaishyas. The fourth level, we have the Shudras. And then we know we have the untouchables here at the bottom. And if you're thinking about what types of people are in those social levels, as a reminder, the Brahmins are priests and religious leaders. So in India, the priests are the most powerful because they're the ones that get to teach the holy text. We've got the warriors and rulers, which are the Kshatriyas. So these are the people that are kind of protecting India and people that are leading. On the third level, we have mostly merchants. So back then it would be people that are trading, moving around from place to place and helping out and getting goods back and forth. The Shudras are our farmers. Remember, our Shudras are going to be the biggest social class of India. So this is going to be 70, 80% of people in India in ancient times would have been farmers because you need them to survive. And then most of you remember the untouchables, but the untouchables are going to be the ones that are kind of performing a lot of the dirty jobs in India. So these are going to be people handling garbage and dead animals, dead people, doing certain rituals with the dead. So that's kind of the levels and the descriptions there. And then in the Vedas that we just talked about, they actually mention the caste system, and they kind of describe how if the caste system is done properly, then the body works properly. So in the Vedas, they kind of mark certain castes as certain parts of the body that they control. So we've got Brahmins first, and if you remember, the Brahmins are controlling the mouth. And it really makes sense for where they placed all these people on the body. So the Brahmins are the mouth because they're the ones that are teaching the holy text. They're speaking with their mouths the holy text. We've got the Kshatriyas, which are going to be the arms. And with the Kshatriyas, those are the warriors, the rulers. So these are the ones that are going to be kind of using their arms for strength, and they're protecting the country. So arms make sense for them. We've got the Vaishyas on that leg level. And Vaishyas make sense for the legs because they're merchants. So they are trading, they're moving back and forth. So they're using their legs quite a bit. And then the last level here we have is the Shudras. The Shudras are the feet. Couple reasons for that. One, because pretty much everything else in India relies on the Shudras. So if you don't have food, you don't really have much. So you need a lot of farmers. So they kind of hold everybody else up, just like feet hold us up. But on the same token, they're also on their feet all day. So that's kind of why they would be the feet. And then on the untouchables are not on the person. They're not mentioned in the Vedas here. Quick commercial break. I just thought this was cool. Wanted to break up your learning here to share you something. So my sister-in-law texted me today, and this is my nephew Jacoby. And I thought you guys would appreciate this. So it says Jacoby's news story for the week. He said Uncle Ryan would love this because he loves Egypt. So he's reading something called Mummies, and I forget what it said, Mummies and something else. So it's a book for kids about Egypt. So I'm pretty pumped about that. So I'm gonna have to ask him how that goes. Hope you guys are reading a little bit, getting to enjoy some of that stuff. And we're back into it. So this next part is going to be the top of the third page of your Google Doc. So with this page, we're going to talk a little bit more about the ancient civilization of India. And then if you remember that city of Mohenjodaro that John Green talked about, and then we spent that one day looking at some artifacts and pictures from Mohenjodaro. So the first thing you want to talk about is just kind of the general layout of the town. If you remember, we would have the upper city here with the citadel, and it's kind of raised up above the town for protection. And then down at the lower part here, this is where the majority of people would live. A little bit lower class, but the majority of people would live in there. And if you remember, Mohenjo-daro was very advanced ahead of its time compared to almost any other place in India. And pretty much any place in the ancient world in general is one of the most advanced places. Some of the things you might remember, they had sewer systems where they actually had a way of taking waste underground, which is very unheard of back then. They had a natural form of air conditioning, which basically just means they had windows up very high so that they could let the air sweep through. They even had an ancient form of screens. They had multi-story homes, which is very unique because most of our ancient places have just small mud brick homes. And then they also had organized streets. You can see in the picture here that this is kind of what they believe it would look like. So very almost like perpendicular streets. Everything was organized, pretty close together, but you don't really see anything like this again for a long, long time. So very modern compared to a lot of different places. A lot of you probably remember the Great Bath, and we remember that John Green wasn't a huge fan of the name the Great Bath. But this is one of the most unique things that they found in Mohenjodaro when they discovered all the ruins. So they don't think that people were just chilling in there bathing, but they do believe that they would use it for some type of religious ritual, maybe out of Hinduism, some type of baptism. So the Great Bath is one of the most unique ruins that have been left behind. And if you remember, there's evidence that they were trading with other places. And one that you recognize is Mesopotamia. So if you remember, they were trading. We knew they were trading because they found stuff from India and Mesopotamia. They found stuff from Mesopotamia and India. So that was pretty cool. And then kind of a unique one, which I showed you some pictures of, they found all these different seals. These trading seals over here would be kind of left with the goods. They were very tiny. If you remember, I showed you, it was like 1 inch by 1 inch, and they had all these very detailed designs on them. So they found hundreds of these, again, proving that there was trading going on back and forth between those two civilizations. And then when we talked about how it ended, they don't know, right? Remember, we have no idea how it actually ended. That's one of the kind of crazy mysteries of this civilization, is that it just kind of disappears one day. Obviously, historians over time and archaeologists have come up with some theories. So here's like their top theories, but again, we don't know for sure. So one theory is that they got taken over, some conquest, some war. Remember, there wasn't much evidence of warfare or weapons and things, so that would make sense. Environmental disaster. If you remember that could have been flood, it could have been drought, so maybe something that happened where they had a food shortage. And then finally, earthquake. That was just a random theory that they think might happen, but if there's a large enough earthquake to shift the river, then that might cause them to have some issues with farming. Just a couple questions on religion, which is kind of in that middle part of your last page of your Google Doc here for your study guide. The two religions that started in India, you should all know that. We've got Hinduism and Buddhism. So we already studied religion. Those are the two religions that develop and have their origins in India. So we're right here-ish for Hinduism. Buddhism starts a little bit more over here. Hinduism starts first. So most of ancient India is going to be out of Hinduism. And if you remember, Buddhism kind of takes over for a while, but then eventually it goes more back into Hinduism again. So if you went today to India, most of India today is going to be practicing Hinduism. But a lot of our ancient cultures were affected by Hinduism, and still Hinduism affects a lot of ancient Indian life, or a lot of life in India today, not even ancient times. So that's going to be the religion that kind of dominates there. And the last part of your study guide here for your knowledge is we've got the Gupta Empire. That's what you just did on Friday in your first week of virtual learning with me. So I did a little presentation last week on the Gupta Empire where you did the Ed puzzle and you answered some questions. So you probably learned a lot about the accomplishments of the Gupta Empire. You can still access the presentation on your classroom, so if you never need to go back and look at some of those. But a couple things to remember. So they call it the Gupta Empire the Golden Age of India. They call it the Golden Age not because there was a lot of gold, but mostly because there was a lot of achievements, a lot of inventions, a lot of cool improvements to life back then. A lot of new things that for them were new, and then for us, we still use today. So they have improvements to math and metal and sculpting and paintings and roads, literature, and universities. They have different colleges. They were studying different things. So all of these different achievements, all these different topics started to have different achievements that were within them. So when it comes time for your test, you're going to want to know why it's called the Golden Age, and then you're probably going to want to know a little bit more about a couple of these that were interesting to you. So maybe you're going to talk about in the universities, when they studied medicine, they would use ant claws to stitch up wounds. Or maybe when you're talking about math, that they were the first people to recognize zero as a real number, or they were the first people to say that there's 365 point whatever days in a year. So lots of achievements, a lot of cool things happening in the Gupta Empire, and that was kind of the last main topic with India here. So that pretty much wraps up your study guide. If you have any specific questions, you can feel free to email me. Your test will be next week. So this week, you're going to focus on your study guide. I want that to be due Friday so that I have time to check it and to look over it. If you have any huge mistakes, I can kind of let you know that you need to study something different. But when you think you've completed your study guide by Friday, just turn it into Google Classroom, click the turn in button,